The Affluent Society Economics.
I'm A.
And I am M. Post-war boom of the 1950s. The general pattern of the 1950s was one of continued economic improvement. The 1950s were years of optimism. Adults used to wartime deprivation found themselves with excess money to spare. There's a task there, what government is in power at this time, and also define what affluent means.
1. Quality of life improved. Food rationing ended in July 1954, and the austerity of wartime was over, so people lived healthily. The war was over, rationing ceased, coal and electricity came back. Almost at once, affluence came. Suddenly the shops were piled high with all sorts of goods, boom was in the air, the nation rapidly moved forward from post-war harshness to Macmillan's. Most of our people have never had it so good. Task. What do you think the end of rationing meant for women? Watch this video.
2. Baby boom. Fast-growing population after the war. By 1961, there were 51 million people in Britain, 5% more than in 1951. The age of affluence was also the age of youth. The novelty of youth in this period was its access to the benefits of affluence. As a consequence, the ability to originate a particular cultural status. The 1950s discovered not so much youth as the teenager, and the distinctive fact about teenagers' behaviour was economic. They spend a lot of money on clothes, records, concerts, makeup, and magazines, all things that gave immediate pleasure. There's a task there. What is the link between a growing population and the emergence of teenagers?
3. There was plentiful employment due to a booming global economy and demand at home, and by 1955 full employment was achieved. Only 200,000 were unemployed. There was an expansion in industry, for example cars, steel, metal, electrical and engineering work. This also meant traditional occupations fell, for example agriculture and fishing. From 1951 to 1964 there was uninterrupted full employment, while productivity increased faster than in another period of comparable length in the 20th century. Total production increased by 40%, average earnings by 30%, while personal consumption, measured in terms of ownership of cars and televisions, rose from 2.25 million to 8 million, from 1 million to 13 million, respectively.
4. A rise in service industries. By 1960, 5 million were employed in this industry. This was 1 in 5 of the population, almost the same as heavy industry. There's a task there. Define what the service industry is, and how could Labour use this growth as ammunition against the Conservatives?
A rise in income. People felt more affluent due to RAB's introduction of a giveaway budget that provided the middle class with 134 million in tax cuts in the 1955 election. So, task. Why would RAB want to do this right before the election? Think about what demographic would vote for the Conservatives.
6. World trade enabled Britain to import 29% more goods than it had in 1951 for the same number of exports. They could also enjoy a higher income per head than other countries.
Okay, the second section is economic issues and policies of the 1950s. The economic picture was not as positive as the growth in affluence suggested. The growth in wages outstripped the rate of increase in production, causing inflation. So, your first task, define in your own words what inflation means.
The Conservatives had to deal with the task of how to maintain growth and employment while keeping prices steady. Government controls had to be used to curb excessive inflation, and taxation remained high. This was to control excessive spending, which would lead to an increase in imports to pay for rising costs of public services. This pattern, as seen on the left, was an attempt to control growth to prevent economy overheating. This was known as the stop-go economics. The Conservatives were constantly faced with the task of how to maintain growth and employment at the same time as keeping prices steady. Macmillan's answer was partly in an appeal to industry and the public, What we need is restraint and common sense. Restraint in the demands we make and common sense in how we spend our income.
However, a problem was caused in the balance of payments as high wages led to customer demand and didn't encourage manufacturers to increase the export trade. This led to a trade deficit. Although higher salaries had created a large internal consumer demand, they did not encourage manufacturers to increase their export trade, which would have helped bolster the export industries.
Run on the pound was started due to exposed financial weakness and pressure from the USA over the Suez Crisis. Solutions over this caused divisions in cabinet in 1957, but in the end, the post-war consensus remained. Task: write out all of the post-war consensus aims.
Economic recovery, 1959. The sterling regained its value against the dollar. The economy expanded so much that in April 1959 they provided tax cuts of $370 million. Macmillan was therefore then re-elected in October 1959, and the British economy was at its peak in 1960 to 1964. Task: when had tax cuts like these happened before? How much were they?
But this led to the government being trapped in stop-go to maintain economic stability. In 1961, a pay pause was introduced to hold down inflation and prevent the economy overheating. Britain had to ask the IMF for a loan. Task: from earlier, describe what stop-go economics is. And developing off this and from the first video, why wasn't RAB well liked?
In 1961, Britain applied to the EEC, but was rejected in 1963. Europe was leaving Britain behind, and trade with the Commonwealth was not enough to keep up.
To address economic issues, Lloyd set up 1. The National Economic Development Council, NEDI, to deal with long-term economic planning. 2. A National Incomes Commission, NICI, was established in 1962 to keep an eye on prices. That's everything. Thank you very much.